Hello, hi. Today I just wanted to lay back and talk about Resident Evil Requiem while I paint some of my favorite inventory items from the game. For this painting, I'm using Prismacolor Coal Erase pencil in light blue for the sketching part and starting with, of course, the namesake, Requiem. I know it's been a while since the game got released, but I only got to engage with it recently, so now I believe is a good time as any. But let me tell you, the painting was a roller coaster. Honestly, I just wanted to draw something for myself from the Resi universe because I'm a huge fan and I've been having so much fun with the release of the new game. But initially, I had planned on painting the characters, Leon and Grace, after which I quickly remembered that I'm bad at capturing likeness. By this time, of course, I was invested in one of my favorite things. Every time one of these games drop, my favorite thing to do is go back, look at all of the concept art for the game, look at all of the items and how the developers design all of the little details in the inventory items. And I ended up wanting something like a poster for myself with all of the inventory items I love. So that is the concept I went with. And yes, of course, one of them had to be the best gun in the game, a Magnum. It did help when I realized that I have never actually drawn or painted a gun before. I don't think I've even painted something shiny. I mean, I must have while practicing, but I don't think I've actually ever painted a gun before. So this was a struggle, and honestly, it will show. You'll see how much I struggled with painting this gun. But it helped that I didn't want to go for the type of semi realism that the game goes for. I actually wanted a colorful poster for myself because a lot of Resident Evil inventory items have this retro look to them with bright colors, and I think it's just so much fun when video game things are very video gamey, if you know what I mean. Which is why I ended up sketching handgun ammo, shotgun ammo boxes, which are the two types of ammo and guns that I rely on the most. They also have very iconic retro looking styles to them. I say I use them a lot, but honestly, the one thing that I use the most it would be the typewriter because yes, I am bad at gaming and I end up having like 40 saves. I also added again, it might not be an inventory item, but I also ended up adding a hip pouch, which is every time I find hip pouches in the game, in any survival horror game, honestly, it is the best. It is always a mini celebration because I'm a bit of a hoarder, so I like to collect everything. I also added herbs and antique coins with a cheeky little star symbol on it as a homage to the old and the new games. You'll see all of these pop up as the sketching process goes on. For the longest time, I actually didn't even know about Resident Evil games because I actually got introduced to it by the movies, which I know that there are divided opinions about the movies, but personally, I love the first two movies. They kind of lost me at the third one, but the lore goblin that I am, I googled it just to find out what even was happening in the movie and realized, oh, it's a whole game series. And that opened the Pandora's box for me. I wasn't even a huge gaming fan growing up, especially not a fan of action heavy games because they can be really overstimulating for me. So even though I loved the Resi universe and I loved the first two movies, I really didn't keep up with the games. It wasn't until a few years ago that I actually got around to playing video games and I found out about Resident Evil 7 only because I heard that it was more of a horror game than action game, and that's how I got reintroduced to the Resi universe. And good on that because it's absolutely my favorite game of all times. I would 100% recommend anybody who wants to try AAA games to start with Resident Evil 7. It's a great game, especially if you're into horror, survival horror games. It's amazing. Since then, I've played 7, 8, all of the remakes, and I was absolutely thrilled when the trailer for Resident Evil 9 dropped. Even if you're not a gaming fan, like I wasn't for a very long time, I think there is something to enjoy about Resident Evil game and Resident Evil universe, especially if you are like me and interested in lore and basically little details, like finding little details about the game and the story and how everything flows. Which, if you are, by the way, I would highly recommend watching playthroughs on YouTube. I know there is a whole audience for it, but if you haven't tried it and if you're looking for something fun, I would highly recommend watching playthroughs or watching little videos about all of these, how the developers actually came about designing the guns, or how they came about designing the landscape for the game, how they decided where the story would be set. All of these little details, they really make for an enjoyable experience, lore wise. And if you are somebody who wants to try the games, it is always nice to know, watch some of the videos and find out what the game is about before you invest so much money in it. Because the one thing about AAA games is that they will fry your computers and they will be expensive. So it's always nice to know what you're being promised. Resident Evil 9 or Requiem is obviously an amazing game. I've only heard great reviews, and honestly, it looks like a gorgeous game in many more ways than I expected. I believe they switched to a new engine for the game. Earlier, they were using Unreal Engine, and now they have a dedicated engine for Resi games, which, by the way, chef's kiss, it looks so good. So it's no wonder that I ended up taking way more time to make these sketches, but they turned out to be more detailed and I actually love them for it. It's just that they took so long, and the painting though, the painting part, that was a struggle. As I said before, I haven't actually painted a gun before. I paint flowers and sceneries and occasionally a face or two. So maybe I painted metallic things before, but I definitely couldn't recall them when I was painting Requiem. And it was difficult. It was the first thing I started with, and it was too tough. So you can really imagine the punch to my expectations for the piece when I started to work on it, and it was immediately too hard for me. By the way, I'm painting the whole thing with gouache. Regular gouache, water soluble, not acrylic gouache. I had found a couple of pictures of Requiem that I was referring to, which deviated from just silver and grays and instead had some hints of yellow ochre. I think some of them were from the first cutscene that introduced Leon and showed the gun for the first time in a yellowish lighting, and some were just edited pictures of the gun. Photoshop pictures. I did my best to avoid any AI edited pictures for this project. I just found that the yellow shade really made the gun look more interesting, and I also wanted to incorporate yellow throughout the painting as a nod to the hints in the game. If you know, you know. And so I went with that and just layered and layered and layered till it had some semblance of metallic. I don't know if I conveyed that very well, but I think it worked out in the end. It's still a thin association to the original model in the game, even for inspired standards, but I got it to the point where I thought it was good enough and just moved on, because this gun took the longest time to paint out of all of the other inventory items. I had so much fun sketching out these items and painting them that I actually think I'm going to do some background studies with the screen caps of the game in the future, because maybe something with the RPD in Resident Evil 2 remake and comparing it to Resident Evil 9. It was amazing to see Raccoon City and RPD again in the new game in its dilapidated state, and getting Leon's perspective across 28 years since he had been there last. And honestly, painting with gouache really added to my struggles. Gouache is my ideal medium for detailed painting. I just find that for graphic and stylized paintings, gouache layers really, really beautifully. But I hadn't painted in a very long time before I started this piece, and gouache can be very finicky. If you're out of practice, especially in the places that I wanted high contrast, gauging light and dark was hard because when you're working with gouache, lighter colors tend to dry darker and darker colors tend to dry lighter. So it takes some getting used to if you haven't painted with gouache before or if you're out of practice. I think I got a hold of that by the end of the painting, but the gun was just a true test of patience. The one thing that I ended up learning was that I never wanted to paint a gun again. I was just so tired and done. I never wanted to paint a gun again. So, of course, the next thing I painted was a gun. Again, the maximum standard handgun ammo, the brand within the RE universe, has a picture of gun on its packing. So, yay! My god, I didn't even try to add details to it. No, thank you. I just sailed through it till I got to the best part, which was painting it bright red. The hip pouch is by far my favorite item on the sheet and in game. I loved painting it. It's such a simple object, and making it 3D or 3D ish was really fun. As I said, I'm a hoarder and a bit of a completionist. So, best believe I am grabbing everything in that game and finding that extra inventory slot every time. I absolutely love the version that is in Resi 2 Remake, and that's the one that I'm referring to here. It's a very simple design, but it has an RPD logo on it, and I thought it would be a nice callback for the poster. I do like Resi 9 hip pouch look too, and I look want to find it. I think it would look really cute with different outfits. And it was such a nice little detail that they still kept the briefcase update for Leon and hip pouches for Grace. Talking about the Resi 9 game, I think the only different take that I have, which might be a hot take, is that I'm not so sure about the 50-50 divide in the gameplay between Leon and Grace. Hold on, let me explain before you say anything in the comments. Let me explain. I think it's really fun that they added Leon in the game. 49 and still suplexing zombies and smashing skulls with his boots. We love to see it, folks. Might I say, some of the parts of it got a little too close to Chris Redfield punching a boulder, which I don't know about those parts. But overall, action filled and still fun. And of course, I'm a simple woman. I'm not going to complain about Leon ever appearing in the gameplay. As I said before, sometimes games can turn out to be different than what you expect them. Maybe it's just me, maybe I didn't understand the messaging that the marketing team was laying down, but I watched the first two trailers and I heard the initial statements of the developers about the game, and it was all about making it scary and drawing inspiration from Resi 7 and rooting the experience in more horror and survival elements. And Grace's sections were really scary. The girl, she was horrifying. She is also something that I'm going to paint later because I love her design. And it's amazing. But as a viewer, I found that Leon's section really took me out of the atmosphere. I will probably have a change of heart later when I play the video game more, but uh, initially it feels like two different games, so I don't know about that. Maybe I just want more sections of Grace being terrified because the atmosphere, the wind in the curtains, it is also cinematic, it is also fun, and I absolutely love the visuals from her section. Since I was going for symbols and inventory items that are a callback to the games, I immediately knew that I wanted the star symbol somewhere. I had added the RPD symbol, I had added the original guns and their ammo shots. I wanted to add the star symbol, and the antique coin was the best place for it. Even though I have not personally played the original games, again, I am a lore goblin, so I know about them, but I haven't actually played them. But I still am absolutely a big fan of Resident Evil Zero. I wish they make a remake out of it, and I would love to see the star members and play as the original Chris and Jill characters. It would be so much more fun. See, I struggle to get the little bit of the coppery feel in the antique coin, but I get into it later again and I fix it up with some color pencils later on. I think the specific in-game brand, appears in Resident Evil 7 and 2 Remake, and those are two of my favorite Resident Evil games of all times. I just love how visually interesting the Resi 2 remake is, how the colors are brighter and it retains the same game feeling with bright blues and reds and yellows throughout the game. I was a bit sad to see that all of that being lost when we revisit RPD in Resi 9, but that's to be expected. But with it being, an abandoned and bombed city, I still appreciate Capcom for keeping the silliness alive though. Honestly, I understand that recently games, especially big games, are moving more towards realism, not just in visuals but also in the gameplay itself. But I do love games being games. I hold the view that any story or any entertainment, whether you tell it by the books or arts or games, it doesn't need to be realistic to convey its meaning. Yes, realism can be fun too, but it doesn't need to be absolutely true to the facts for it to be the best piece. In fact, I think that best pieces are the ones that take advantage of the medium to tell the story instead of thinking of all of these mechanics as limitations. So I am a-okay with there being no fall damage for Leon and Grace. I love the whole bike chase sequence. It's brilliant. It doesn't get more video gamey than that. In fact, I think it was hilarious when Leon commented on how weird the RPD's, statue puzzles were, and I absolutely love that we got a tofu cameo. I said it. It was the best bit in the entire game. Does a sentient tofu make sense? No. It's lore relevant and hilarious, and that's what it's all about. By this time, adding all of the little shells and little ammos in the painting was getting really tiring. But as I said, I wanted it to be very retro feeling and have it a little bit more colorful than you would expect, because that is, I think, charm of these older games, or games that are built upon this just universe of older games, that they have a lot of retro feel. So even though I was very tired of painting red shotgun shells, I just powered through it. Do you ever have something that you really wanted to paint, but by the time you come to it, it just gets so intimidating? The typewriter was like that for me. The sketch came out so pretty, but by the time I reached the typewriter, I was tired. It had been multiple days of me painting, so many hours of it, of recording, and so I kept the style a little too simple. I think it is something that I might go back and add more detail to, but I still think it came out cute. I think Resident Evil is such a classic zombie horror game that we kind of forget to appreciate it. Don't get me wrong, it is not very original. It is pretty much the same old, hey, there's a virus and now people are coming back to life. But I think that it is such a good starting point, and it is such a cult classic video game that you can't help but enjoy it. Adding just a touch of realism and trying to balance having silliness while also trying to, comment on the depth of the characters. I think that Resi 9 does a fantastic job for that. I believe there is also a Resident Evil live action movies. There are also animated movies. There are also, of course, there is a Netflix adaptation for it, which is a TV series, Netflix TV series for it. But I genuinely think that if you want to get into Resident Evil games, highly recommend going through some of the plays that Resident Evil has. Imagine that there are plays that the Resident Evil franchise has. They are not 100% story relevant, I believe, not since they started redoing the story or reframing the narrative in Resident Evil 7 and all of the games that came after that. But hey, if you're a geek, check it out. I struggled a little bit on deciding what healing item I actually wanted to paint. I had settled on initially the glass bottle for Resident Evil 7. It's a green glass bottle, and I think it's such a cool design. I really wanted to paint that. I didn't really want to paint Resi 9 healing injectors, med injectors, because they just didn't look as much fun. I mean, they are relevant to the game. Love how there is consistency there. 7, but I ended up deciding that I wanted even more color. So I ended up sketching out herbs. And again, these are from Resident Evil 2 remake, I believe. So I added red, yellow, blue herbs, and I didn't have the space to add the green herbs. I know they're so iconic. You have to have green herbs, but I just ran out of space, and I thought that adding the red, yellow, and green would complement the other colors that were in the painting. I also kept the herbs very simple. I didn't want to add too much detail and have them contrast with other elements in the painting. In the end, I just relied on minimal shading and just making them look 3D-ish, the same kind of stylized form that I was going for with the other elements. The painting by this point was coming along pretty well. There were just some areas that I was iffy with. I still wasn't very happy with the way Requiem was looking. It didn't have enough contrast, in my opinion, and all of these little things like the typewriter, the buttons, all of these, I just felt that I was relying a little too much on my smallest paintbrush, and I just thought that it would be much more easier to build contrast with pencil colors, even though I don't usually like to use pencil colors on top of gouache, just because I think gouache in itself usually gives me an end product that I'm pretty happy with, like a painting that I'm pretty happy with. Sometimes with detailed paintings you just need that extra pop of contrast or color. So I'm using Prismacolor Premier color pencils. Unlike the coal erase pencils, these are, I believe, oil or wax based, which makes it tricky to use it on top of gouache, but can be a little bit tricky to use them on top of gouache, and often it comes out in a bit of a grainy texture unless you're putting a lot of pressure on it, which is not the vibe I was going for initially in this painting. But as I said, I was just losing a lot of contrast, and I was getting very tired with the very, very small paintbrush, and I wanted a little bit more of a pop of color. So, but I am also trying to get used to multimedia painting. Gouache looks really matte and flat in the end, but I think I want to experiment a little bit more with texture, which is why, even though I wasn't fully confident with these pencil colors, I just decided that maybe it will give the painting I just decided that maybe it will give the painting a little bit of an oomph that I was looking for. By the way, I see it. I see the typewriter, the keyboard of the typewriter not being a straight line. I see it, but just don't look at it. Don't look at it. I realized that it wasn't a straight line way after I was done painting, and I didn't want to go back to fix it. So don't look at it. If you don't look at it, it will go away. So don't look at it. In the end, I think using the pencil colors was a great idea, because just how it brought all of the texture out, especially in the gun. I like the Requiem way more now after using pencil colors. I also used the white pencil color to write all of the names on the boxes, the ammo boxes, but I realized that it wasn't popping enough, so I did end up going back to white gouache and using that to write all of the names on the ammo boxes. had so much fun painting this poster. I love how colorful it came out. I had absolutely so much fun going into the details of these inventory items, and I hope you like them too. So if you enjoyed the video or my commentary, do consider subscribing, liking, and leaving a comment. It can be really encouraging for me to see that everybody likes the content that I'm putting out. And that's that then. See you next time. Bye bye.